5 years after the central government decided to bring in the Citizenship Amendment Act 2019, the centre has now finally decided to implement it and has also notified the rules for its implementation. We're being joined by Senior Advocate Sanjay Hedge in this regard. Sir, what is your take on implementation of CAA now by the centre, especially considering that it has come in ahead of the upcoming Lok Sabha election?
Well, it's come ahead of the Lok Sabha elections. It's probably come in just before the Model Code of Conduct kicks in. So it looks like one of those things which were on the government agenda, which had been kept back for whatever reasons that they had, and they've notified it just before the elections are called. Whether they have any political motives or not, that is for them to say, for the government to say. The fact, however, is that the amendment is being challenged in the Supreme Court. Those challenges are pending. There was no stay on the Amendment Act because every act comes with a presumption of constitutionality. We do not know when the Supreme Court will finally hear those challenges. But in the meanwhile, the amendment has been operationalized now by bringing into force the rules. Maybe somebody will challenge those rules as well. As of now, there is nothing major which has happened. The act was already there. If the act is held to be unconstitutional, these rules will also go. If the act is held constitutional, it may well be that these rules may face other challenges also, that they ultra vires the statute and things like that. They may be separately challenged. Today, there is no reason for anybody to be particularly triumphant or particularly upset. That which was the position 4 or 5 years ago when the amendment was passed by Parliament continues to be the position.
So, like you mentioned, petitions challenging the constitutionality of the Amendment Act are still pending before the Supreme Court. Do you think the fact that those petitions are still pending before the Supreme Court could have acted as any deterrence for the centre before implementing?
No, I don't think there is any deterrence. Any act, it is a citizen's right to challenge it, saying that it violates the fundamental rights or that there is no legislative competence or that it is manifestly arbitrary, etc., etc. Citizens are entitled to do that. Courts will examine the constitutional challenges according to their rosters, their calendars and all that. In the meanwhile, if there are no interim orders, governments are free to act on the basis that the specific legislation is legal, constitutional and has not been stayed by any court.
So one argument against the CAA was that it may have the potential of depriving Muslims who are living in India of citizenship. What's your take on that?
See, the Citizenship Act, the government has been continually saying, is an act for granting of citizenship, and it is not an act for taking away citizenship. But there are many ideas of citizenship. We have never as a nation differentiated between our citizens on the basis of language, on the basis of religion, or on the basis of any social identity marker. This is the first time that we have a legislation which says that there will be based on religion, that there will be certain preferred religions who will get a fast track to citizenship, and there will be other religions who will have to come through a slower route. The very idea of having a preferred religion or a less preferred religion, that to my mind is un-Indian.
So another one of the key oppositions of CAA was the fact that persons can enter the country without any documentation. Now, the schedule in the notified rules do require documentary evidence for grant of citizenship. Do you think that would affect the petitions which are pending before the Supreme Court, which have questioned the constitutionality?
What you've asked are questions of practicality, of operation. Questions of constitutionality are essentially questions of power. Can the government do it? Does it have the competence, and does it violate any of the fundamental rights? So I don't think these minor questions of operationalization will affect the petition.
So talking about the practical issues, the documentary evidence is needed according to the schedule and the notified rules. Now, the centre has been saying that the idea behind bringing in CA is to benefit people who have been facing religious persecution. People who are fleeing or leaving a country because of religious persecution may not carry their documents with them. They will not, in all probability. Don't you think this need of documentary evidence would be contradictory to the main object as is being stated?
As somebody wittily put it, you're asking for documentation from Pakistan and Afghanistan. And at the same point of time, there are people with Indian documentation whom you want to keep out. So yes, there is an anomaly, but then that is the way of administration. There are anomalies all over.
So, like you said, an act of legislature or an act of parliament presumes constitutionality unless and until it's struck down by the court. Now, these petitions have been pending before the court for over 4 years now. No stay, as you said, has been granted till now. Now, the act will be implemented as well. Are you expecting any interference from the top court after all this time?
I have been in litigation long enough never to presume the result in advance. There have been arguments which I may not have accepted, which have been accepted by the judges, and there have been arguments which I thought were very strong, which have been poo-pooed by the judges. So I would not hazard any guess on the ultimate outcome, but I do believe that the petitioners have a very strong case.
So lastly, would you like to share your experience as a mediator during the Shaheen Bagh protest back then? Because you've seen the on-ground situations and the grievances of those who were protesting back then.
Well, I was appointed as a mediator in a particular situation. The court had asked me to go and require the protesters to clear the road. So that was a limited brief, and I tried it. Then COVID came and the process was unnecessary. But during the course of all those meetings, I found one thing. I found that the men and women all over India are very proud Indians. And any questioning their Indianness makes people very sad, makes people probably defensive, and has unnecessary complications. What we should do is to work together to build a great country. We do not do that by excluding people.
Thank you so much for joining us. That was Senior Advocate Sanjay Hedge speaking to us about Centre's decision to implement the Citizenship Amendment Act 2019. With camera person Ashwini from New Delhi, this is Shrishti Ojha, India Today.